Welcome everyone. My name is Claudia. I'm from the TAC events team, and today I am joined by Ryzen and Enexis. Please feel free to pop your questions for the speakers in the Zoom chat, and we'll get the chance to answer them at the end of this session. Over to you, Joachim.
Thanks, Claudia. So good afternoon. My name is Achim Krüger, and it is my honor to introduce the session with our customer Enexis today. I myself have been a long time with SAP and now with a partner of SAP, Rising, and I'm responsible for our EAM business in EMEA. So Rising is supporting Enexis business transformation, renewing their core ERP systems to SAP S/4HANA, including things like core EAM, project system, PPM, integration with supply chain, as well as with GIS. So briefly introducing Rising, we are a consulting partner solely focusing on SAP and busy with EAM since 2005. We are a global partner supporting asset-intensive customers in many industries. And besides EAM, we have lines of business for success factors and consumer industries, as well as specific capabilities around GIS, which of course then nicely connects to our EAM business, specifically in utilities. Next slide, please. So our portfolio of services and solutions range from management consulting into the implementation with SAP. And we are also creating some of our own products, which are complementary to SAP Intelligent Asset Management. So for example, in the area of mobile applications, integration with Primavera using HANA technology, and more specifically, and I think quite interestingly, for utilities, for the integration between GIS and SAP with our product Mercury. And of course, in case you would like to know more, please visit us in our booth or send us a message. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our speakers for today. Next slide, please.
Just 1 second, because it seems to be stuck. Yes.
There we are. So let me introduce Simon Baumeister. He is at Enexis, the product owner for asset portfolio management and the respective applications to be introduced. And then we have Gijs Gijsbrechts, who works as a solution architect in the very same area. And Simon and Gijs, floor is all yours now.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, Enexis is a leading publicly owned distribution system operator in the Netherlands. It's a distribution for medium voltage electricity and low voltage electricity and gas. And it's an intermediate between well, our TSO, Tennet and GasUnie, and customers for consumers, but also for producers or local producers of gas and electricity. Our area is in the northeast and southeast of the Netherlands. And well, our portfolio is at the current state almost 1 billion euro per year. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, and then the next slide. Well, in 2019, a climate law was introduced in the Netherlands, and its objective was to reduce the greenhouse emission. The standard was set at halving the greenhouse reduction by 2030. And almost reducing all of the greenhouse emissions by 2050. So a very ambitious goal. And by 2050, 100% CO2 neutral electricity supply. In which you can see that in the lower right graph, that means that there is an increase from 2017 to 2020 in the sustainable capacity on our grid. It is almost quadrupled. And this means that there is an extra workload to make the electricity grid future-proof, which means that we are currently operating on programs to introduce smart grids in our area, and also to increase the electricity transport capacity of the grid, just to accommodate all those local sustainable electricity production customers. And not only in the electricity grid, but also in the gas grid, because of the Dutch climate law, also green gas and hydrogen is introduced in the gas network. And we are currently transiting from gas for sustainable heating for buildings, and which also means for heat pumps, and which also means that there is an increase in the electricity consumption. And that means that our current portfolio doubled from 500 million euros to almost 1 billion euros in the current year. Next slide, please. Well, this means also an increase in workload, and well, that's difficult to handle because at the first we have increase in shortage of transportation capacity, not only from our local grid but also from our TSO, and we also have a shortage in engineering capacity to build all those new electricity connections. 5 years ago, we had sufficient capacity, so we didn't have to make any difficult choices. But nowadays, we have to prioritize all those projects in our portfolio. So we have more projects than resources available, technical resources and also human resources, and to execute all those projects, which means that now we face a problem that we have to prioritize our portfolio. And that means we want to maximize the Enexis strategic business objectives, but given a certain amount of resources we can use to execute our portfolio. And it also means that we need an integral planning on a strategic, tactical, and an operational level. And that means that the line of sight for those 3 levels is becoming very important. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Well, this is the line of sight. As Enexis is an ISO 55000 certified company, and which means that we have the roles asset owner, asset manager, and service provider. The asset owner is the owner of the asset base and also defines the strategic goals for the company. The asset manager is the one who translates all those goals to actions, and the service provider is the role for the execution of all those actions. So the strategic plan is a long term of 20 years. It is high over, and the impact, it is more centered, focused towards impact of external trends and developments on the external asset base. The tactical plan, that is more a midterm plan with a scope of 2 years. It's more detailed, and it's focused on the impact of the resources on the work package. So in the asset management department, we currently face the challenge that we have to maximize the work for the service provider, given the amount of resources available. Because, like I said, we have more work than we can manage at the moment. And the operational plan is a short-term plan, 1 to 2 quarters, and it mainly consists of our projects, which have to be executed. So the relation between the asset owner and the asset manager is for managing the strategic goals. For asset management and the service provider is more managing the work package. And between the service provider and the asset owner is more managing the efficiency and productivity, so getting the work done. What is important in the line of sight that all the work done by the service provider contributes to the strategic objectives as set by the asset owner. So the control and accountability lines are very important. And currently in our current way of working, the control lines and accountability lines are not optimal. So they have to be improved. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is the right part of the line of sight I just showed with the asset manager and the service provider. And in our team with Gijs, we are just focusing on the tactical plan. So the tactical plan that contains all the desired work and the assignments for single projects. And we want to have control, good control and accountability lines for the tactical plan. Well, the tactical plan nowadays consists for 50% of a budget, and the other 50% about amounts of work to be executed by the service provider. And the idea is, the concept is that we divide the tactical plan in a purely planning for the desired amount of work and assignment part. And that from this service provider, we get a realization back. And we can compare the realization with the plan and the assignments. And that all in amounts of work, so physical amounts of work, with a start of end date, is it on time? And also a budget, is the efficiency, are the efficiency standards met? Each month, the plan is adjusted in the latest estimate. So we're going to adjust the plan and this assignment part of the portfolio, and that's done by the portfolio managers at Enexis. So that's the basic concept. Can I have the next slide, please? The current problem is also between the link between the strategic and tactical plan. The current situation, the strategic and the tactical plan are two plans which are weakly linked. And we want a more firm control and accountability lines between those two portfolios. So the proposal is now that we have one asset portfolio with a strategic layer and a tactical layer. And we see from a top-down perspective, the control line. At a strategic level, we are going to determine the strategic portfolio first, which is focused on the impact of external trend and development on the asset base, and which also serves as a target for the tactical portfolio. And then secondly, we are going to determine the tactical portfolio more in detail. And for the work, we want to select the work because there are not enough resources available for the amount of work. So we have to make smart choices there. Well, the other way around, from bottom to top, that's the accountability line. So everything that is realized at the service provider has to flow upwards also to the strategic portfolio. So also at the strategic portfolio, you can manage the feedback to the asset owner. Can I have the next slide, please? The other concept we want to introduce is standard units of work, of building blocks, and to improve the exchange of information and efficiency. This is a new concept at Enexis. Our current portfolio is set within, like I said, budgets and amount of work, but we want to express the whole portfolio in a standardized use of work. And with standardized units, I mean everything is cut up into small pieces of work on an asset with a certain activity. So that combination is one standard unit of work. And the standard unit of work is expressed in well, personal work, so hours worked, material, so in pieces and in meters cable or pipeline, and in services, so contracting quantities. And we do that at the strategic level, tactical level, and at the operational level. And that means that we can plan better because our resources are quantified, so we can calculate with them. The budgeting is done in euros on a systematic in a systematic way, and also the governance is improved because we can compare plan versus actual, and also benchmark certain regions. So we expect that this improves the efficiency and productivity, so we can get more work done with the same workforce, which is important because we have more work than capacity at the moment. Can I have the next slide, please? So for the to recap, we have 3 different kinds of portfolios, from strategic, tactical, and operational. And each portfolio consists of multiple plan items. And all plan items have a hierarchical relationship. So we just like I said in the showed in the previous slide, that the controllability and the accountability can be done, and all the plan items, well, they consist of impact on business objectives, so that we can not only know how much work has to be done, but also the impact on the strategic goals from the asset owner. And those amount of work, those are expressed in those standardized units of work, which also have a hierarchical relationship. And this is important because we want a consistent framework on the standardized units of work. Can I have the next slide, please? And then the next slide. Thank you. So the whole line of sight, how is it from a system perspective? On the left side, you see the asset investment planning software, in which all the plans are made. So the strategic and the tactical plan. What we do in SAP is managing those plans. So now we're currently working on managing, configuring the SAP for managing the tactical plan, and which means that we're going to monitor it on a monthly basis and also interlink it with the financial modules of the SAP system, and to interlink it with the Oracle system in which the service provider works for executing the projects. So this is from a business perspective, a very quick and overview of what we want to accomplish within for the Enexis project, for the building the line of sight. And I think now I hand it over to Gijs to tell more about the system aspects of the implementation.
Okay, thank you, Simon. So Simon basically explained what kind of like new governance we want to put in place for Enexis. And what I want to explain to you is what systems we are using, what kind of architecture, and also which challenges we have been facing. Now I have very limited time. I only have like something like 10 minutes left, so I have to go through it fairly quickly. If you have any questions, apparently after this meeting, we have still 10 minutes left in order to answer your questions. So feel free to ask anything which is unclear to you. So looking at high level architecture, we basically have two main flows, so to say. We have, in both flows, we have three, let's say, modules in place. We have PPM, the portfolio management part. We have PS, where we make use of WBS structures. And we have plant maintenance, where we make use of compatible units and PM orders. So at the top, we have PPM, in which we are currently putting in the tactical portfolio. And as Simon discussed, this is with like a view of like 2 years in the future. And this process is about, let's say, work which we are triggering from an asset management point of view. And this is like a fairly standard PPM scenario where asset management basically gives an assignment to the service provider, which is in PS and in PM, and says, okay, I want you to perform this kind of work on this location. So basically a specific project. Now that starts with a PPM item, which then generates a PS project. Now, where we deviate from standard is that normally you would work with network plans, network activities underneath a PS project. But on this project, at least within Enexis, it has been decided that instead of network activities, we want to work with compatible units and PM orders. So we have an integration between PS, which is basically like a financial collector, and the compatible units / PM orders, where we plan and execute the actual work. So the PM orders, they flow into the WBS elements, and with standard rollup, everything goes back to the PPM item and then is reported throughout the portfolio structure. That is one flow. Now, the next one is where we do not have like a specific asset management assignment from a portfolio point of view, but where the project starts from within the service provider. Again, we have the same components. We have the same portfolio structure. We have a PS project, which is generated whenever the service provider identifies a certain piece of work which needs to be executed. And we make use of compatible units and PM orders in order to plan and execute the actual work. But what we do not have is a direct link between a PPM item and the project. And here we work differently because most of the work which is identified directly by the service provider, we're talking about huge amounts of projects. And since we do not want to have huge amounts of PPM items in portfolio management, we do not have a direct link. But what we do is that we settle the costs of all these projects to an internal order, which is assigned to a PPM item, and like that, bring in the costs of all this work into portfolio management. And I'll get into a little bit more detail in a later slide as to why we do that. So, but basically we have two scenarios which we are currently implementing. Now, looking at the portfolio structure, what are we putting in place? A portfolio from a standard PPM point of view, a portfolio represents the organization's, let's say, entire work package of programs and projects which you want to perform. And within Enexis, we currently identify 3 portfolios, but we're talking about one portfolio here, and this is the tactical portfolio, which is all about managing work with in relation to Enexis assets, the so-called tactical portfolio. Now, a portfolio consists of buckets, and buckets, they form the portfolio hierarchy, which is used as a reporting structure. So however you set up your bucket hierarchy will also, how must I say, will also decide on how you will report in the end on your portfolio. And a bucket basically represents an organizational element, a department, or a responsible person to whom programs and projects are assigned. You can use buckets also to budget and perform like a top-down or a bottom-up approach. You can put cost planning on them, you can report commitments and actual costs. So your bucket structure in many cases is also important from, let's say, a financial portfolio point of view. Now, within Enexis, how do we set it up? We have like a tactical portfolio in Enexis. Underneath, we make a division in regions. We have a region north and a region south. Underneath the regions, we have the different plants which are responsible for executing the work. And underneath the plants, we have 4 main processes which the service provider executes. The so-called projects process, the maintenance process, the malfunction process, and the standard domestic connection process. And they all work a little bit differently, so that's why we also identify them within the portfolio and also within the operational administration as different processes with also their different system setup. Now, basically, this portfolio holds 2 main stakeholders. First of all, finance and asset management. For finance, we need to make sure that within this portfolio, we have a very detailed financial planning in there. And what do we use that? What do we use in order to initiate this planning? We use so-called PPM initiatives. Now, initiative in PPM is an object which represents a program of work within a portfolio. So basically a program of projects. And they are used to group so-called portfolio items, which I will get to in the next slide. And a portfolio item is basically normally like the first step towards an actual operational project. So within an initiative, we basically group portfolio items or projects together. Now, the requirements are from finance that we have very detailed financial planning and reporting, and that we plan the portfolio by, as Simon already described, the so-called desired work. So every piece of desired work from an asset management point of view, we translate into an initiative. And that desired work consists of for a specific process, for a specific plant, into an activity type on a certain asset group. That is how we identify a plan line item of desired work. And we should be able to plan on personnel cost, material cost, and services cost, where we also can automatically calculate overhead over those cost categories. Now, the challenge here is that standard PPM cannot automatically calculate overhead using the standard financial planning functionality. So what did that mean for us? That we, when it comes to desired work, we use two objects. First of all, we use a PPM initiative, and linked to that, a CO internal order on which we do easy cost planning. So the financial planning does not directly take place in PPM, but we do it on linked internal orders using easy cost planning. And on that, on these internal orders, we have so-called costing sheets with which we automatically can calculate the overhead. Now, what does that look like from an architectural point of view? If we have the technical portfolio here and we have our buckets, then with so-called bespoke programs, periodically, we create or change PPM initiatives for these desired work line items and automatically also create an assigned internal order, an easy cost planning's internal order, on where the actual planning for this line items take place. And that with standard PPM rollup, we bring all these planned costs into PPM. And from there, and that's not in this architecture slide, and from there we bring it to BPC, because BPC, business planning and consolidation, is where finance is working. So we also have an integration between PPM and BPC. Of course, if you have planned costs, you also want to have your actual costs against it. And for actual cost collection, we use items. Now, from a standard PPM point of view, items are projects or project proposals, which can be planned, budgeted, evaluated, and prioritized. And you, going through a decision-making process, turn items into actual PS projects. And you have the possibility of, once you approve an item, a project proposal, to automatically create that PS project. Now, the requirements for actual cost collection with us is that we need to be able to split the actual costs in what is CapEx and what is OpEx. And due to a large number of projects in certain processes, we cannot directly assign them in PPM as items, because, for example, the domestic connection process means that we have tens of thousands of, let's say, tiny projects in there, which we do not want to have as PPM items. So challenges here is that standard PPM does not have an automatic CapEx and OpEx split, and we need to have some kind of a decoupling point for certain processes where we do not want to go the route of creating a PPM item and then a project, a PS project. Now, what do we do here is that, and I probably better go to the next slide, go into the architecture slide. We already looked at this. We had a PPM initiative. We have an internal order for the planning, but we create two additional internal orders, a so-called CapEx and an OpEx order based on object class on the order, and also link that to the PPM initiative. Now, for these large number of projects, so in the domestic connections part, we do not link these projects directly to a PPM initiative, but whenever we settle the costs from these projects, we statistically settle the costs to the correct internal orders as well. So to an internal order which is CapEx or which is OpEx. And like that, again, with financial rollup, we bring the costs into PPM. So basically, we have a decoupling point between the PS project and how we want to report on it within PPM. If we have assigned work, so work which asset management has identified as like a clear project which they want the service provider to execute, then we go to standard route. So underneath an initiative, we create a PPM item. That PPM item goes through an approval process, and it will create automatically a PS project. And then everything which will be posted on this PS project via the object link between item and project with a standard rollup will roll up onto the PPM item and go to the PPM initiative, where all, let's say, the assigned work, so the individual projects, are collected. Because, as I said before, an initiative is basically a program of projects. Now, this is all about finance, about our stakeholder finance, which wants to be able to report on plan against actual, because that is important for the total Enexis company plan. Then looking at the portfolio management process, which we are trying to put in place currently for asset management. And this is all about managing the work package based on progress of the work package. Now, Simon already talked about asset investment planning. So looking at the pipeline of projects, that is not done in PPM, but we will have a separate application for that, Copperleaf, in order to do the management of the project pipeline. The results of that will be interfaced with PPM. So the results of this pipeline process will go into PPM, and it will lead to these desired line items. So lead to PPM initiatives. And it will also lead to assigned work. So basically from asset investment planning, we will be having, it's kind of like a prognosis of a budget. So we expect so much work to be done. And this expectation is then translated into at least partly clearly assigned work. So these are our PPM initiatives, these are our PPM items, and then we come into the actual project, the execution project, which initially is planned and then gets into its realization phase. And in a monthly process, we are constantly comparing desired units to be executed versus and desired start and end date, which is basically put on the assigned items versus the planned units to be executed, the planned start and end date, and at some point the actual units to be the actual units which are executed, and the actual start and end date. And based upon these reports, we are constantly readjusting. So you are either readjusting your desired work in the desired units, which needs to be executed. The assigned plan, we readjust. So we can readjust from this point of view by saying, okay, asset management, you need to change your desired start date or end date or your desired units. Or the service provider has to change basically their planned start date, planned end date, and planned units.
So this is, we have to come to an end and wrap it up, because otherwise we will be kicked out automatically.
Okay. Then the last slide is that what we do bring in on the items and on the projects is that we are going to basically measure the progress based on desired dates versus planned dates versus actual dates. The planned dates and the actual dates will put onto the PS projects. The desired dates will be on the item, and using so-called decision flow management, we will make sure that these dates basically are synchronized between PS projects and PPM items. And with, let's say, BI reports, we are going to bring everything together and like that, try to put in place a proper portfolio management process where we report on the progress of the work package, using dates and using units to be executed, instead of, let's say, fairly detailed and complicated progress analysis as you also have in PS, but for which we think that we are not quite ready yet, and basically work with dates and with units. Okay, that's basically it, what I can tell you in such a short time. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, many thanks, Simon and Reis. I think we will be kicked out in a minute or so. So I would suggest that if, in case there are any additional questions, and one is in the chat that we will answer directly then. But if you have additional questions, please just visit us at the booth or just schedule a direct meeting with Simon or Reis. So many thanks for attending, and handing it back to Claudia.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentation. And here on the screen, you'll just see a quick reminder about other activities happening across the platform today. And just as the Rising guys mentioned, do please visit the booth under the SAP and Partner Zone later today. But that's it from us for now, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.